sirens wailed in the crisp night air, a chorus of chaos that sliced through the heart of Birmingham, Alabama. Blue and red lights flickered ominously across the otherwise silent streets, painting macabre shadows on the face of Lieutenant Colonel Angela Moore's world as it crumbled beneath her feet. Her heart was pounding, a drumbeat echoing the rhythm of disbelief coursing through her veins. Her hands trembled as she clenched a photograph, its edges worn from countless touches, a snapshot of her daughter, Elise, with her radiant smile and dreams stretching far beyond this town. Elise had been pulled over on her way back from a late-night study session, her backpack now discarded on the pavement, its contents strewn haphazardly like remnants of a life disrupted. The screams from her friends in the video posting on social media were still buzzing in the back of Angela's mind, a distorted symphony of terror witnessed live, recorded by the shaky hand of youth amidst flashing police lights and the aggression of unchecked authority. The crowd gathered, hushed under the weight of the tragedy, watched as Angela knelt by the spot where her daughter had fallen, where the bloodstains now cemented the narrative of horror and heartbreak into the asphalt. Here lay a scene twisted by prejudice, wrought with the bitter understanding that systemic racism had raised its ugly head once more in an unfathomable act of violence. Angela's presence was a stark silhouette against the glaring lights, a statue of resilience in a tableau of tragedy. "Ma'am," a gruff voice, thin with unease, broke through the solemn silence. A police officer with a face ashen under the harsh lights, one among many standing guard over the turmoil they could not contain. "We need you to step back for your safety." Her eyes met his, a piercing gaze that demanded answers in the language of a mother's eternal love. "For my safety?" she repeated, her voice cracking with sorrow yet edged with steel. "My daughter was unarmed. Where was her safety?" The question lingered, unanswered, as Angela looked over at the line of police cars, a gauntlet of flashing lights and authority. To them, Elise had been nothing but a statistic, another face in a narrative twisted by assumptions and fear. But to Angela, Elise was life itself, a blazing force of change and potential, now snuffed out by those who had sworn to protect. Her hands instinctively found her pocket, wrapping around her phone. It was more than just a device now. It was a weapon, a lifeline, a mouthpiece to a world ready to hear her cries for justice. The video, already viral, painted a damning picture, but Angela knew this wasn't just about Elise. It was about every black child who had walked through life with their mother's warnings heavy on their shoulders. Angela's gaze swept across the faces gathered, the curious, the indignant, the sorrowful. Here was her jury, her allies, her testament to the world of the disregard for black lives. The shared silence was their collective scream, demanding justice, answers, change. Angela stood, her resolve hardening into a shield. "Remember this, record this," she said, her voice rising above the murmurs. "Let them know. They didn't just end a life today, they ignited a movement. My daughter's voice will not be silenced." As she spoke, each word seemed to reverberate through the crowd, weaving into the fabric of a struggle much larger than herself. Angela looked toward the sky, where the stars had begun to peer through the fading siren's glow. For the first time, she felt the weight of the night shift from anguish to determination. She was no longer just Angela Moore, the soldier or the mother. She was the vanguard for justice, ready to fight until the end. The crowd pressed in, bolstered by her defiance, forming an unbreakable wall against the oppressive silence of complicity. And as the evening air hung dense with expectation, Angela knew, deep within her soldier's heart, buried beneath the layers of time and circumstance, that the battle lines were drawn. This was only the beginning. The ride home was suffocated by the stark silence of loss. Lieutenant Colonel Angela Moore, once a formidable figure known for commanding the respect and fear of her Delta Force peers, now navigated the empty corridors of her daughter's absence. The hum of the engine did little to quell the torrent of memories that flooded her senses. Birthdays blown out with laughter, midnight whispers under quilts, the flash of hope in Elise's eyes when she had spoken of her dreams. Angela's every nerve trembled, not with fear or uncertainty, but a fire-fueled urgency that spread uncontrollably through her soul. She reached her driveway, the house looming like a monument of the life once brimming within its walls. Each step was heavy as she forced herself toward the door, her military boots crunching the gravel in rhythm with the pounding of her heart. She remembered jubilant squeals of "Mommy's home," greeting her from countless tours, joyous cries now echoing hollow in the biting wind. But this was a different battlefront, a fight not against foreign enemies, but deeply entrenched hatred and ignorance in her own backyard. The living room was untouched by time, contrasting sharply with the chaos in her life. Angela's eyes locked onto a shelf adorned with medals and photographs, a tempered pride mixing glory with the enormity of her loss. Her fingers brushed against Elise's trophies, relics from high school achievements that testified to a passion for justice and equality as fierce as her mother's own. Angela swallowed hard, words tumbling in her mind, questions Elise would never hear. Who do we fight now? The crackle of a fire beside her buoyed Angela into movement, compelling her to embrace the clarity she was known for in strategy sessions and battlefield engagements. Upon her desk lay a brown folder, the start of her campaign for justice. Documents lay clipped, forms awaiting dispatch, all destined to be part of the inferno she planned to unleash. She sat and started drafting letters to influencers, visionaries, leaders who could amplify her cries into a movement echoing from coast to coast. A soft knock on her door startled her. The sound so far removed from her raging thoughts, it's alien in its subtlety. Opening it revealed Jerry Thomas, her husband, wearing an expression of subdued strength. His grief was silently implosive, finding refuge in perpetual action. He had been Elise's coach, her mentor, her anchor. "Angie, you okay?" he asked softly, his voice a salve to her exposed wounds, grounding her as only those who share shattered dreams could. "No," Angela replied, raw honesty cutting through the decorum. "But we'll find our way. We'll take this battle straight to those bastards." "Damn right," Jerry affirmed, his presence a fixture of solidarity. He held her gaze, dark and deep as the unfathomable sadness they shared. Their mutual silence was an understanding, unspoken but infinitely powerful. They were parents, warriors in a different kind of war, their resolve linking them in a chain unbreakable by grief. She returned to her desk, calling up one of Elise's former teachers and activists who had marched alongside civil rights icons. "Ruth, it's Angela. I need your help." The conversation that followed was a lattice of plans entwined with urgent purpose, plotting the next decisive steps they would take to expose the truth and rally their community. A sudden urgency gripped Angela, reminding her of combat tours in terrains where every decision held life or death consequences. This was no different. She saw Elise's face in her mind's eye, urging her onwards, imploring her not to falter without justice worn like a shield upon her soul. As Jerry slipped a comforting arm around her shoulder, she allowed a single tear to escape, a wordless tribute to the daughter who had been denied their future. "They'll learn Elise's name all right," Angela murmured, her voice edged with promise and fury. "She'll be the story that ignites this fight, whether they're ready for it or not." The room around her fell silent, but in her heart, Angela heard the clarion call of battle, one not against enemies seen, but against the invisible specters of ignorance and intolerance that had taken her daughter's future. She would wield every bit of her training, every ounce of her strength, to slay this new enemy and ensure her daughter's life would become the catalyst for unyielding change. As the night waned, Angela knew the path forward would not be easy, but it would be traveled by the footsteps of those they refused to forget. The small office of civil rights attorney Martin Reeves buzzed with electric tension as Angela deftly navigated her way through the maze of desks and ringing phones. A mountain of case files lay like offerings at the altar of justice in the cramped sidelong office. To Angela, this felt less like the seat of a renowned legal mind and more like a nucleus of revolution. She didn't care about the decor. It was purpose she sought, a bulldozer for the mountains of injustice and prejudice that still loomed over her, shadowing every step she took. Inside, Martin Reeves, a man of wiry build with eyes that burned with the fire of convictions hundreds of cases deep, sat hunched over a file. The room was a gallery of rebellion, its walls adorned with images of marches and faded newspaper clippings detailing important victories and harrowing losses. Reeves was known for taking on the cases that others wouldn't touch. His tenacity had, however, made him many powerful enemies, a challenging frontier Angela was ready to cross. "Angela," Martin said, standing to greet her with an earnest shake, his voice a rasp against the fury storming within. "I had Elise in law school workshops last summer. Brilliant, focused. This is all wrong." Angela nodded, stepping into the intimacy of shared grief. Behind her eyes, rage simmered just beneath the surface, refined by the respect for Martin's grim understanding of the stakes at hand. "I need justice," Angela replied, the statement hanging in the air like a whispered prayer, encased in desperation and resolve. "They took Elise, and I will not let them get away with it. Not this time." Reeves gestured towards the chair, a silent invitation to begin strategizing their assault on the unyielding wall of systemic injustice. "What we have here isn't just one bad decision," he said, unlocking a cabinet bursting with files. "It's embedded racism, Angela. We've got history to tackle and retribution to demand." Angela leaned in, bracing herself, preparing for the firestorm she was ready to unleash. She breathed deeply, focusing on the gravity of every breath, every moment. Elise was just a child. They vilified her. They feared her without even knowing her. This is bigger than us, Martin. We have to make them accountable. We need to change their narrative. "You're right," Martin said, his fingers drumming a rapid rhythm on the desk. "And we'll start by bringing their procedures into question. We need evidence of racial bias, statistics, testimony, anything to highlight their practices for what they are. Discriminatory." Angela nodded, the tactical elements of the conversation a balm for her raw emotions. "I've already talked to Elise's friends who were there. We've got witness testimony. Some officers are unhappy with what's going on. Discreet contacts, you know?" She paused, her military acumen weaving through her words like fire through a fuse. "I promise you, we've got support behind the blue wall waiting to break." Martin's eyes flickered with the kind of hope forged from relentless battles and unyielding resilience. "Sounds like you've got what it takes to make this explode wide open," he remarked, admiration threading through his voice. "And let's not underestimate the power of public pressure. With the right legal grounds and media leverage, we can push the DA's office to file criminal charges. It won't be easy, but you're bringing a damned army with you." The room fell into a contemplative lull, infused with the energy of strategy born of necessity. Angela's mind flashed through memories, the steel against her shoulders, the essence of Elise caught forever on camera, each dedicated to a cause larger than themselves. "I'm ready to take this all the way, Martin. I want their names, and I want them brought to trial. Whatever it takes, whatever the cost." Martin nodded, resolute in the face of Angela's determination. He knew that the lions he fought were neither imaginary nor easily slain. But alongside Angela Moore, this wasn't just another legal endeavor. It was personal. "Angela, you and I both know there's a war worth waging here, and we'll have to fight smart. The media is going to be crucial. We stage a press conference after the appeal, demand accountability in the public sphere." Angela leaned back, her expression solidifying into a mask of steely resolve. With her eyes trained on the path they were forging, she felt a flicker of something pure, a soldier's instinct matched with a mother's resolve. This isn't just justice for Elise. It's for every single one who's been affected. For those who didn't have a voice, this is just the beginning, Martin. With their course charted and their weapons drawn, Angela and Martin knew theirs was a fight not just for justice, but for the soul of a society long silenced by acquiescence and fear. Together, they would wade through the tide of prejudice, armed with truth and vision. They would carve a new narrative, one where Elise's voice would forever echo as a beacon, demanding to be heard. The sun set over the small town of Birmingham, casting long shadows as Angela stood at the edge of the city square, the heart of her hometown pulsing with a new kind of life. Reporters, microphones poised like weapons, lined the perimeter of the makeshift stage, the epicenter of seismic shifts, ready to shatter facades of stone, metal, and rigid blue. A sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces stared back at her, some alight with the fire of shared grief and anger, others with veiled curiosity as if witnessing the unfurling of history. Among them stood Elise's friends, elders who had marched decades prior, and mothers who now clung tighter to their children, eyes wide open to the reality of their precarious protection. It was in these faces Angela saw solidarity, a force magnified through common purpose and the unforgiving sting of lose. Her heart beat in harmony with theirs, the rhythm unstoppable and unyielding. Angela took a breath, feeling every nuance of the moment, the tension, the expectation, the weight of justice she bore on her shoulders. Each syllable she crafted had the power to become a clarion call for change, a rallying cry against the silence. She stepped up to the microphone, fixing the crowd with a gaze that did not flinch under the camera lenses that sought to capture her every flicker of raw emotion. The night air cooled her burning cheeks, cold and real, like the sharp edge of determination. The world seemed to hush, leaning in to absorb every word left unsaid. "My daughter, Elise," Angela's voice quavered with grief, tempered by the iron will beneath, was more than just a statistic. She was dreams unfurled, a spark of defiance in the face of conformity. Today we honor her not merely as a victim, but as a beacon for a fight against an age-old tyranny. Her words cut through the night, each phrase a well-drawn line between them and a society tethered to outdated ideologies. She continued, her voice gathering strength like a river gathering floodwaters. "Elise's death will not be in vain. They underestimated us, thought we would dismantle, thought we would yield. But here we stand, in the same streets that forge history into reality, as living proof of transformation." Behind her, Martin Reeves stood in silent endorsement, a pillar of assurance in the maelstrom of uncertainty. He nodded subtly, as if encouraging a general amidst clamor, urging fury transformed into coherent action. Angela's gaze hardened, scanning the faces before her, each etched with lines of expectation, marinated in heartbreak, waiting for a resolution. "I am calling on everyone here today, and those beyond, to hold them accountable. Let us demand transparency, accountability, and dismantling of a system that failed Elise and continues to fail those like her. We stand here as one until justice finds its way through these maze-like streets." A slight pause punctuated her words, allowing the crowd to absorb the gravity, before she brought her speech to a crescendo. "We need more than change. We need to rewrite the narrative. We need to compose a history where Black lives are cherished, where we stand tall on the shoulders of those who once marched these very routes for equality. This is not just our fight. It is a call to arms for those who know the sting of injustice. For we will not rest until mothers like me never fear the sound of that familiar ring, the homes that cradle our hearts shattered over." A tide of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces hardened with renewed determination, others with silent tears tracing paths through the dust of complacency. Angela grasped the podium, steadied by the storm of emerging resolve, the torchbearer for a train of inevitable transformation. "I ask you, no, I implore you, to stand with me for Elise, for your daughters, for sons, brothers, sisters," Angela concluded. The pulse of her declaration echoed defiance warped into a living testament. "They took from us once, and it will be the last time. Together, we are unstoppable." The crowd erupted, a roar of approval washed over, voices braided into a relentless chant for justice. Their cry echoed off the buildings, rolling through the square and beyond, soaring into the silence of the starlit sky, a testimony that reverberated not only in their hearts, but in the foundations of the walls they would shake until collapse. As she stepped down, her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and determination. The square teemed with hope, a promise harnessed not only from the approaching horizon of a new dawn, but with the swift, unyielding certainty of a legacy driven by a mother's love. The morning sun tiptoed over Birmingham, casting golden hues onto faces still etched with the fervor of last night's rally. Angela awoke to the softened cacophony outside her window, the sounds of a town slowly rousing under the weight of new purpose. The air thrummed with the kind of quiet before a storm, an unmistakable tension ushering in a day that would refuse the simple comfort of routine. Angela moved through her morning tasks almost mechanically, awakening to the reality that every ordinary act, pouring a cup of coffee, dressing, slipping on a coat, felt like an aggrandized ritual. Today was not ordinary. Today had the potential to set the tone for the pivotal change she had invoked to the crowd, one fueled by the last words Elise had written in her notebook. A spark can ignite mirrors of silence, becoming the voice of us all. As she stepped out onto her porch, the neighborhood brimmed with life, neighbors gathering in small clusters, eyes alight with anticipation and a hunger for change that Angela glimpsed at the rally. This was no longer just her fight. It belonged to them all, shared amongst mothers, sons, and those who refused to be bystanders. Jerry was waiting by the car, an anchor amidst currents of uncertainty, his smile steeped in shared resolve. "Ready?" he asked, his presence soothing the tempest within her. "Let's light them up," Angela replied, steel cloaking her words with gravitas. The streets buzzed as their car traversed the town, windows down, the outsider hum of voices uniting in collective resolve, a call to action, the town's pulse quickening as the protest loomed near. Angela saw Elise's friends, now more soldiers of change than students, chalk in hand, inscribing Elise's words on sidewalks and walls, where they would become emblematic for a movement seeking permanence beyond paper. Finally, they arrived at Kelly's Park, flanked by towering sycamores, the heart of Birmingham now its battlefield. From every corner, clusters of people emerged, banners held high, ribbons fluttering in the morning breeze. They wore determination like armor. Each sign bore Elise's face, and slogans forged in passion and loss. The atmosphere was charged with the kind of energy that ached to breach the barriers of indifference. Angela and Jerry wound their way through the gathering, pausing to shake hands, their faces mirrors of shared grief and burgeoning hope. This was a new narrative they were writing, one where voices rose in unison rather than whispered from the corners. The ground beneath her feet was sacred, drenched in the echoes of struggles past and dreams hovering just out of reach, waiting to break free. As the sun reached its zenith, a hush fell over the crowd. Angela took center stage, facing the masses gathered in hopeful defiance, their eyes a combustion of yesterday's fire burning furiously into today. She felt Elise's presence with her, a whisper of encouragement, a reminder of why they stood tall today. The chanting rolled across the park, voices herding together to form tidal waves of sound. No justice, no peace, a mantra that evolved into rhythm, an echo bouncing off the cityscape, urging the barricades of the entrenched to crumble. Throughout the day, speeches resounded, stories told from podiums in tones that sung the blues, screamed the injustice, painted pictures of a world yet to be realized. Human chains formed, contact providing solace as well as a unified front against a history defined by oppression. Children sang alongside elders, creating an unbreakable tapestry of unity and resolve, a testament to a community crying out to rewrite their pages. As dusk descended, shadows lengthening across faces illuminated by candlelight, Angela took the stage once more. Her heart swelled with the energy of the hours, spent banking the fires of hope. Voices clashed against an unforgiving system. Amidst the softly flickering glow, their collective breath awaited her words, a promise of the change they had gathered to demand. "I stand before you as a mother robbed of the future she was denied," Angela began, her voice riding the gentle breeze. "But I also stand before you as one part of an unbreakable chain, a testament that we are something more than ourselves. Together we command not just attention, but action." Her gaze swept across them, noting the faces damp with tears yet shining with resolve. "I promise you, Elise's voice will carry," she continued, the promise branding her words into the night. "We are the catalyst. Today we surged forward, our footsteps echoing in places where silence demanded endurance. That endurance has become a roar." The response was overwhelming. Applause, cries of solidarity, gestures full of gratitude and encouragement. A symphony of fevered pledges of perseverance resonated. The protest was ending, but the movement was only just beginning. Angela stepped down, her face reflecting embers of candlelight, each glowing flicker a pact made in this hallowed park. On this new day, she stood resolute, holding Elise's words close. "A spark can ignite the mirrors of silence, and through it we create the voice of us all." The office was thick with tension, an oppressive fog that lingered just above the mundane chatter of phones and the clatter of keyboards. In the sterile halls of Birmingham's police department, a storm was brewing, a tempest that promised to challenge the blue wall separating justice from accountability. Angela walked through the corridor, her military bearing unmistakably stiff, meeting eyes upturned from desks where officers whispered in hushed tones. Her presence was science to inevitability, the harbinger of change that demanded courage, both from those who wished for reform and those entrenched in resistance. The meeting room door loomed ahead like a portal to destiny, its frosted glass betraying nothing of the conference beyond. Angela felt the weight of every injustice her daughter had suffered, straining her patience against the inaction stretched thin. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, a courtroom of tension, pulling attention sharply to her arrival. Sergeant Malcolm White, a seasoned officer with grizzled hair and a permanent scowl etched into his weathered features, sat at the head of the table. His eyes flickered with a mixture of disdain and something far more primitive, fear. Next to him, Chief Oliver Gordon cut a more composed figure, a man trying to contain the eyes of a city with answers less forthcoming than his uniform demanded. "We've placed Officers Reed and Collins on administrative leave pending investigation," Gordon announced, the words, sterile as paper, pinned under bureaucracy's heavy thumb. Angela stood at attention, resisting the urge to meet this revelation with contempt's label, yet recognizing the strategic weight behind each of Gordon's empty words. "Administrative leave?" she echoed, the question carrying the silent multitudes she represented. "For what they did to my daughter?" The room shifted, uncomfortable glances ricocheting off surfaces in a dance of diversion. The narrative lay unwritten, these men now tasked with facing the shame their badges could no longer conceal. "We're proceeding with an internal affairs investigation," Sergeant White declared, though the businesslike tone stressed token gesture over substantial relief. His delivery betrayed the rehearsed, almost mechanical enactment of protocol starkly misaligned with justice. The air bristled with incredulity. Angela's stare remained unwavering, the fury of her child's loss igniting like gunpowder set too near flame. "IA will not be enough," she stated firmly, voice as unyielding as steel. "I demand transparency, external review, public accountability. You owe that to Elise, to this community. If you wish to extinguish this fire, you'll need more than water from the same trough." The silence that followed was an uneasy truce, the department's facade of invincibility crumbling beneath Angela's intentions. She had not come to seek solace in procedure, but rather to demand the pen-wielded injustice recast in the light of transformation. The brigades, the officers exchanged looks, defensive alliances forged in silent compromise. But beneath the surface discord, Angela noted flickers of agreement passed between those who shifted in their seats. Her armor was becoming knowledge, that many who served alongside them feared the old guard collapsing into what she was chasing, hoping to realign with what was necessary rather than accepted. Chief Gordon's expression sharpened at her words, the weight of Angela's conviction too glaring to ignore entirely. "We want to ensure a thorough investigation, Lieutenant Colonel. Rest assured we understand the gravity." "What gravity have you grasped?" Angela interrupted, her voice now a steady flame. Her words came measured, poised, though threatening to breach the walls of their rehearsed polite evasions. "This town is at a tipping point. The public will not settle for backroom maneuvers, justified only by Union scripts and boot-polished smiles." Malcolm White's eyes briefly fell, his indomitable demeanor facing the unstated grief that filtered through the room like dust motes exposed to light. It was then Angela recognized the stirring of a shift, that beneath this shield of layers who held power, walked strong but quiet allies willing to join her out in the open. The tension spread like crackling electricity ducking through copper way lines. Chief Gordon leaned forward, a flicker of compliance beginning to glint unsteadily in his stern gaze. "I'm prepared to discuss further external involvement with oversight bodies," he concluded, the admission pulling taut the line between reluctance and resigned acknowledgement of their interconnected realities. Angela nodded, allowing silence to bear witness to the call to action's new life rising from its ashes. She recognized incremental victories for what they were, stones paving the path towards significant reform, and with it, justice for her daughter. The meeting adjourned under the suffocating quilt of tasks left undone. Angela departed, knowing her footprints within those halls now etched deeper than before, trail markers identifying the way forward in a campaign stitched from hope and a fierce aversion to complacency. There lingered no doubt that the wheels she had set in motion would gather dust no longer. This quest would serve as the pounding heart amid volcanic changes, mirrored by the movement unleashed on Birmingham's streets. Angela returned home to a hollow quietude that clung to the walls of her house like a persistent specter. The emptiness was more profound now, the space once filled with Elise's laughter and life, now echoing with an unrelenting sense of absence. As she moved through the rooms, she felt the ghostly traces of her daughter, her presence embossed in every turn, every quiet corner. The yellow of Elise's room glimmered with the dusty glow of morning. Angela stood silently in the doorway, absorbing the evidence of her daughter's vitality. The vibrant record albums left in perpetual disarray, the books cradled open on her desk, their pages fragmented conversations left unfinished. Each object was a monument to Elise's interrupted journey, a testament to all she might have become. Angela walked over to the desk, her fingers lingering over Elise's notebooks. She flipped them open gently, scanning the written dreams and aspirations scrawled in Elise's neat handwriting, the whispers of ambitions and fears shared in the privacy of these pages. Her eye fell upon a sketch, a woman, fierce and unyielding, standing tall amidst a crowd. "My vision for the future," Elise had annotated beneath indeterminate script. Angela gently traced the lines, feeling a pang at how these dreams now depended on her to be realized. Elise's voice was thick in her mind, and Angela allowed herself to drop into the memories, the cascade of moments that had forged the depth of their relationship. She remembered the late nights shared over steaming mugs of cocoa, their long talks about politics, about justice and equality, about why some people chose to wear blindfolds rather than face the glaring light of truth. She remembered Elise's questions, the ones that delved into why. Why couldn't things change? Why did people fear what they didn't understand? It had always astonished her, Elise's keen intellect probing the fault lines of society with the same curiosity she used when dissecting a puzzle. The pain welled in Angela, fierce and relentless, her thoughts returned to that day, the screech of tires, the warped screams followed by a deafening silence. She relived moments in vivid fragments, the mundane things she never thought to treasure now layered with immense significance, the way Elise would call her mom, in that particular tone. Full of both aspiration and challenge, seeking solace, Angela moved to the window, her gaze falling upon their porch, where Jerry sat, his head bowed with quiet dignity, as he whittled aimlessly at a block of wood, a tradition his own father had passed down, now a ritual of grounding amidst the chaos. His hands were steady, though she knew the turmoil he too carried within. Angela slid open the window, resting her arms on the sill, calling out softly, "Jerry, do you remember when Elise asked us why everyone didn't see people for who they really are? Not just by what they look like?" He stopped for a moment, the knife pausing mid-cut. "Yeah," he said, his voice a rumble as comforting as old leather. "She said if people could just meet others as they are, the world would be a kinder place. She always asked the toughest questions." Angela smiled, her heart aching with love for the essence of the daughter they both missed so dearly. "Tough, but necessary," she replied, her resolve steeling itself against the impending tide. "I want those questions answered. We owe it to her, to every child who wonders why the world is as it is." Jerry looked up, meeting her gaze with a serenity that masked his pain, a signal that their shared strength was far from depleted. Sometimes words were unnecessary. They had learned to understand each other through the unspoken language of shared tragedy. Angela knew this struggle was not just for justice, but for Elise's legacy, a drive to keep alive the dreams Elise had dared to dream. They had to keep asking the difficult questions, keep pushing against the barriers that sought to suppress them. Every step on this arduous path was a stand against surrender, an assertion that they would continue to fight, come what may. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the window, Angela felt the flicker of renewed energy. She turned to face Jerry, who set aside his carving, and together they embraced the flow of a night much like the one before, a trellis of memories intermixed with hopes for what lay ahead, their bond, their shield against a world demanding transformation. They would ensure Elise's voice reverberated in the corridors of power, a testament that love's pull was stronger than fear's threat, relentlessly steering them toward progress. Angela's car wove through the hushed streets of downtown Birmingham, the buildings casting looming shadows contrasted by the unwavering glow of street lamps. The city was alive in a different cadence now, whispers of change stirring through its veins, urging a reckoning that Angela had vowed to bring. She arrived at the law office of Martin Reeves, the civil rights attorney who shared her drive to unravel the threads of injustice woven through Elise's death. Inside, the office buzzed with quiet urgency. The scent of strong coffee permeated the air, a congregation of files spread across every surface like the gathered petals of an endangered bloom, each petal a story, a cause. Stride toward truth. Angela found Martin hunched over his desk, his eyes skimming through stacks of paper, fingers drumming a restless rhythm born of fevered anticipation. "Angela," Martin greeted, his voice holding a note of fatigue crushed beneath resolve. "I think we're on to something." Angela stepped forward, the grit in her step mirroring her eagerness. She pulled up a chair, her posture coolly focused, every muscle poised to absorb the details that might bridge hope with action. "Show me." Martin pushed a file toward her, words highlighted in deliberate strokes. "Evidence of systemic profiling," he began, his gaze piercing. "I had some contacts dig up records. Incidents over the past few years showing a pattern of racial targeting by the precinct." The revelation hung palpably in the air, offering both a direction for their fight and another reason to loathe the circumstances that necessitated it. Angela leaned over the table, absorbing every line, every detail, etched into the surface of inconsolable reality. A mix of numbers and narratives unfolded before her. Reports of excessive force, disproportionately affecting minority communities, all linked like threads in a web of downplayed accountability. "This," Angela said, her voice firm and tinged with anger, "this is what we need to expose them." Martin nodded, pulling out another folder with care. "We also have an inside source willing to testify about discriminatory conduct during training sessions." He paused, a flicker of caution shadowing his determination. "That won't be easy, Angela. The repercussions are severe, but this could implicate the entire department." Angela absorbed the weight of those consequences. She knew the path they were treading was precarious, that whistleblowers stood on the edge of a precipice as threatening's loyalty tread heavily underfoot, but she saw strength in vulnerability, a possibility to break open the door they couldn't batter down before. "We have to tread carefully, ensure their protection," she acknowledged, the silent promise of safeguarding shaping her response. "We can't let them fall victim to the same system they aim to expose." Martin's nod was slight and solemn, mirroring her sentiment. His gaze softened, any sense of defeat banished by the steel of shared resolve. "There's something else," he continued, pulling out a stack of documents chronicling policy amendments long overdue for review. "A legal strategy hinging on reform could bolster our case. Use this incident to push for comprehensive changes." Angela took the document in hand, absorbing the fresh possibility of reform written through these pages. Her daughter's face hovered in her mind, a reminder tethered by love and loss alike. Elise had always believed in growth and justice, that the institutions underpinning society could evolve into greater swords forged from equity rather than exclusion. "What about the community?" Angela asked, her thoughts trailing to the crowd of faces that had gathered in fervent unity. "They're ready, Martin. We have a movement behind us. We can pressure the city council to act, to support these changes." "They'll listen now," Martin acknowledged, a sharp intensity burning in his eyes. "With the evidence, with this support, we can get people to open their doors, their eyes, but you have to galvanize them, keep them informed, even as we take this through the legal channels." Angela nodded in agreement, realization sharpening her conviction. The steps were set: build, expose, reform. It was not just about fighting the system, but revolutionizing it, nurturing accountability among those meant to protect rather than oppress her community. Rising from her chair, Angela met Martin's gaze, an unspoken understanding flitting between them. "We'll need help," she stated, determination like iron plated her voice. "More allies, more voices to echo this cause. I'll keep spreading the word. Ensure the community remains united." Martin extended his hand, a promise frankly seeded in camaraderie. "Let's tear this whole damned system wide open." Angela shook it firmly, their pact entrenched by the seeds of resistance now brilliant in bloom. Their fight, her fight, was far from over, but this was tangible. They were moving closer to something that could redefine their society's landscape. As she left the office, night yielded its blanket over the city. Yet it bore witness to lives reframed by hope of justice unprecedented. Angela felt it in her gut. The revolution was near. Shadows and fears cast aside for futures embraced within the light born from Elise's legacy. The courtroom buzzed with the tense whispers of anticipation, each conversation a thread woven into the fabric of an intensely charged atmosphere. Angela stood by her attorney, Martin Reeves, feeling the surreal weight of the moment press upon her shoulders. The air was thick with the smell of polished wood and the quiet rustle of legal documents, a contrast to the storm roiling within her. The faces in the gallery mirrored a populace ready to explode, reflections of shared anger and hope. There were friends, family, and strangers linked by Elise's tragedy, simmering with the collective demand for justice. Each was a witness to the legal confrontation about to unfold. Reporters camped at the back, their pens poised and cameras sporadically flashing like lightning amid heavy clouds. Angela's eyes locked onto the defense table where Officers Reed and Collins sat, their expressions as guarded as soldiers at a crumbling fort. They bore the nonchalance of men shielded by system, their eyes avoiding the gallery packed with righteous fury. Angela felt her fists clench, her body an instrument of her rage, barely kept in check. "Keep it steady, Angela," Martin murmured, sensing her inner tumult. His voice was a low current, an anchor in the swell. Today, we lay the groundwork. We show them that we won't be ignored, no matter how much they hide behind badges. The presiding judge, a stoic silhouette of impartiality, entered the room with an air of grave authority. "All rise," the bailiff intoned, and the room rustled into motion like a waking giant, tangible, collective tension crackling with potential energy just beneath the surface. As proceedings began, the prosecution opened with a measured statement, seasoned with the truths everyone in the room recognized but never voiced. Yet what caught Angela's attention was the calm falsity in the narrative relayed by the defense, a tapestry woven with thin threads of misinformation, entwined with procedural jargon designed to obscure. When the defense stood to speak, they tried to unfurl a narrative drenched in ambiguity, twisted in angles, attempting to obscure the harsh truth. Their account framed Officers Reed and Collins as upstanding men of the law, ensnared by the unfortunate consequence of duty. Angela's heart thudded painfully as they recounted Elisa's last movements with carelessly detached detail, like marionettes dancing around the truth shrouded in selective memory. Yet it was the sotto voce discussion slipped from defense lips, statements she knew to be untrue, that caused her to inhale sharply. Every inch of her bristled, each heartbeat louder in her ears than reason or judgment. "Do you understand what they're doing, Angela?" Martin whispered in her ear, his gaze not straying from the unfolding drama. "They want to sway the narrative into something less than it is. But the truth is our ally here. They speak as if she were a storm-born myth, not a soul who lived and dreamed," Angela replied, her voice a veneer stretched taut over the depths of her composure. "This is far more than what they portray." The prosecution's rebuttal caught the glint of the storm, presenting facts sheathed in determined steel. Evidence of systemic bias unfurled before the court. Logbooks of disparate treatment, body cam failures, and a trail of complaints filed and forgotten. It was an unveiling of truths long buried under paperweights and redacted reports, now brought into glaring light. Still, the battle waged over perception, as each word passed beneath the judge's keen, droning presence, a metronome marking the beat between bastions of unmistakable truths and softly recorded injustices. Angela returned to her seat when a brief recess was announced, the tension a tangible cloth suffocating hope. Her mind raced over the proceedings, trapping her between past and present, a net weighted cast by eyes of those who demanded answers more than comfort. The gavel called them back to order, shivering through the air as tension coiled anew under the judge's watchful gaze. The defense went back on the offense, drawing out technicalities and opaque reasoning in a desperate attempt to soften the glaring harshness of facts. Angela met their gaze squarely from across the courtroom, her eyes ablaze with the unextinguished fire of motherly fury. Her resolve had never hitched, not from the first harrowing moment to this uncertain juncture, a silent promise to unravel unsound narratives, even when faced with dismissal's compelling visage. In the courtroom's suffocating conclave, Angela knew the path to justice stretched far beyond this day's battle. It was a long war against an entrenched power refusing to yield. But Elisa's memory demanded no less than every shackle shattered, every lie unearthed. She breathed deeply, eyes fixed on the judge, the prosecutorial force to be harnessed with the pressure point of truth, ready evermore to script change's tale upon justice's scales. This was merely the first act in a larger play she would orchestrate using truth as her lens, and love of her daughter, as her unfailing guide to a justice long denied, but now shimmered, just barely within reach. The late afternoon sun filtered into the office of Martin Reeves, throwing angular patterns across the walls as Angela entered. The room, a chaotic symphony of paperwork and legal volumes, hummed with an urgency that felt almost alive. Martin sat behind his desk, fingers laced together in contemplation over the torrent of information they'd amassed. The day's events had been a harsh reminder of the deep-seated obstacles they'd faced. Angela sat down heavily, the weight of the courtroom still pressing on her. Her mind replayed snippets from the hearing, dissecting every argument, every glance exchanged, each an examination of the silent language that spoke louder than any formal proceedings could. The struggle was real, elongated, through the dance of rhetoric and the stark barrage of half-truths, lying like landmines across the path of justice. Martin cleared his throat, his chair creaking in the charging silence. There's no denying today's proceedings were tough, but they had no choice but to face evidence as stark as we laid it out, he said, cutting to the chase with the precision of a surgeon. Angela nodded, the resolve still strong within her, but edged now with a fresh, fierce need to push further. They're entrenched, Martin. They won't yield. Too much pride and power at stake. But there's something in those whispers, the way they shift under scrutiny. Martin leaned forward, his chin resting thoughtfully on his hands. What's our strategy? The protests outside have heat behind them. We need to keep that momentum, bridge it with our case. Angela sighed, her thoughts a meticulously threaded tapestry of intention and opportunity. We need their whispers to turn into testimonies. If we can get someone from within to break ranks, to corroborate the implicit biases and malpractices, it'll strengthen our position. Martin frowned, acknowledging the inherent risk of such a maneuver. Not easy. The code of silence is nearly sacred amongst them, especially now that they've been dragged out into the glaring spotlight. I have an idea, Angela replied, her voice sharpened in newfound determination. She recalled the resonance of doubt seen in a witness officer's eyes. Uncertainty strained between duty and guilt, a flicker of safety routed through possibly distant empathy. Officer Jensen, she continued, naming him aloud. He looked haunted. Unlike the others, he showed signs of a conscience. He might just be the lead we need. Martin considered, nodding cautiously. Jensen's been with the force for over a decade. If he's willing to admit to any conversations, to what really happens behind closed doors, it could be monumental. Angela felt the familiar edges of her military strategy firm around her thoughts. We'll have to approach carefully. With everything exposed, every action magnified 100-fold, the pressure from his peers will be immense. Her voice steadied further, conviction in every syllable. But if anyone understands the weight of carrying secrets, it's me. Martin leaned back in his chair, looking through her as if aligning the possibilities in the sky. I'll work on seeing how receptive he might be under legal circumstances. Discreetly, of course. If his testimony confirms our wider case, we'll pull apart their defenses like frayed cloth. Angela absorbed the plan, understanding the gravity mingled with exhilaration. A lieutenant staring down one more hilltop, one more encampment to take in pursuit of the greater good. It was a one-step-at-a-time approach, each footprint marking possibility against adversity's dark marker. Then there's the media, Martin continued, seeing the narrative widen beyond the bounds of his office. They are the linchpin to public pressure, ensuring our efforts don't vanish in bureaucracy. Angela nodded. We'll feed them information systematically, keeping speculation factual, hard-hitting. Her gaze flicked towards the office window, seeing the city beyond, a vessel of potential waiting to be stirred. We'll leverage every metaphorical weapon we have. Martin folded his glasses, setting them deliberately upon his pile of notes. You'd have made a hell of a lawyer, Angela. She allowed herself a small smile, one sewn with layers of resilience stamped indelibly into her core. I'm a soldier, Martin, always fighting for what's right, even when the odds are manifestly steep. They stood together, a front implacable before the next surge. Outside, the hum of the city bore testimony to a fight that rippled far beyond that courtroom. A battle passed through angry whispers, stories shared over flickering candlelit vigils. This conflict, intertwined with justice, restless as the wind, demanded a reckoning wrought from truth's reforged blade. Tomorrow held its own agenda, and Angela, alongside Martin, was ready. They would script today's adversity into victory, each step a mark upon the annals of overdue change. hinged with Elise's light guiding the emergence of what once lay concealed behind fears now brought to bear under their command. This struggle, they vowed, would shift the paradigm, one disclosure at a time, one disclosure at a time. The air outside was heavy with anticipation, thick with expectation, threaded through the calls of protesters gathered en masse. Birmingham's City Hall overlooked Jefferson Green, now a vibrant bastion of unity and defiance. Angela stood at the periphery, her presence surging energy into the throng, a symbol not just of one mother's fight, but a community's rebellion against the oppressive norms that had framed their lives for too long. Amidst the cacophony of the rally, each voice rose with neither fatigue nor concession, blending into a single force of shared purpose. Banners fluttered in the breeze, emblazoned with Elise's name alongside words demanding justice that echoed the cries of generations past and present. It was a palpable reminder of why they gathered, to bear witness, to demand, to ignite change. The chants crested like waves, churning the air with the furor of righteous dissent. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. The call and response beat a synced rhythm that pulsed through the city, leaving vibrations that would pass through the windows to those in power. Sitting sheltered and comfortable in their chambers of decision, Angela worked her way through the crowd, exchanging quiet words of encouragement, her gaze fierce and steady, encouraging in the face of so many stories. Each nod, each fleeting touch of hands shared a bridge between isolation and collective strength, an unbreakable wall formed from shared hardship now aimed at dismantling injustice. She spotted Martin on stage, gesticulating with the microphone, weaving the narrative of truth around the spoken word. His voice cut through the tumult, relaying updates, recounting the steps required to foresee victory on the horizon. The crowd absorbed every syllable, intent on their shared manifesto. "The eyes of the nation are centered on us," Martin proclaimed, grounding the crowd beyond mere protest. "Our voices are shaking the foundations of power, our presence an irreversible step toward change. We demand police accountability, transparent practices, justice for Elise and for everyone who suffered in silence." Martin's words fueled the drive, pressing harder against the oppressive weight history had let linger unchallenged for far too long. And there, in those silent promises echoed, Angela felt the raw power of what together they could achieve, a seismic shift waiting to reshape society beyond legacy confines. Angela glanced toward Jerry, who stood with Elise's friends, unity carved into every shared glance, every hand extended to pass the candles to light the night vigil they were preparing. Their effort bound them invisibly, shaping the force that broadened their purpose to embody all those who reached for justice out of every shadow. Her thoughts turned to the courthouse, monitored from a distance by somber statues of poised officers, a reminder of the battle awaiting them, wielded in solemn exchanges far from the fervor of this charged ground. This was the reality. Protests pressed beyond simple disruption to charge the canticles of action into blazon change. But these street dynamics served a greater goal. They were a constant reminder, drumming their campaign's heartbeat, to those who sat cushioned behind walls growing thinner with every chance passage. Angela knew, in her heart, it would take more than speeches. It demanded resolve in the trenches as much as in hearings, commitments transforming shadow to sequence under every witness's silent plea turned roar. The path they walked stretched interminably, shifting beneath them, yet alive with shared intention, to see justice not as abstract but felt, breathed, embraced. They were not here for mere compromise nor polite consolation, but for a seismic transformation that required understanding knitted across divides both spoken and long left unsaid. Martin finished his address, stepping down as Angela took the podium with the amplified support echoing in the crowd's favor. "Every single person here carries a piece of the struggle embedded within them," she began, her voice coursed with emotion, dynamic as the lull pulled taut between cheer and solemnity. We stand not just for Elise, but for every voice unheard, for every right denied. Her words, burning with the fire from which they were forged, kindled the spirits of those still gathering. This is our movement. This is our time to channel our grief, our anger into action. Faces upturned beneath the sky mirrored the spectrum of their common pursuit, each person an unyielding beacon in this storm for what Elise had stood for, the life she had needed to live. As the evening sun kissed the skyline in a cascade of gold through violet, candles ignited one by one, painting the twilight air with the warm glow of remembrance and resolve. Angela moved among them, a whisper against the past's roar. There was no question of if, but when. When would they realize their united power had transformed whispers into mandates, a call no longer able to be ignored? Change was coming. They'd ensured it. Elise's dreams laid bare beneath the open sky tonight. Her voice, their voice, growing roots that held steady against the prevailing winds at last. Back at Martin Reeves' office, the atmosphere was charged with a relentless urgency fueled by the day's events. The office had become their war room, an epicenter of plotting and reconnaissance, where each file and document seemed to vibrate with the possibility of exposure and justice long overdue. Angela sat across from Martin, their earlier adrenaline-fueled speeches now giving way to the tempered assessment of strategy. Behind them, the evening settled, casting long shadows that danced across maps and papers strewn about. The protests had infused them with hope, but it was the evidence that would wield the final hammer blow. Angela watched Martin intently as he leafed through a fresh report, every page a potential catalyst for change. The compilation landed heavily on the desk between them, the stack a symbolic weight to the burden they carried. "This report," Martin announced, his voice laden with resourceful gravity, "comes from our whistleblower, Officer Jensen." He paused, savoring the victory each page held. "He's confirmed systemic racial bias during precinct operations, backed by logs and transcripts." Angela leaned forward, feeling the electric current of progress pulse through her veins. "Is it solid?" she asked, her voice charged with a quiet intensity that only the battlefield of a mother's fight could sustain. Martin nodded grimly, a flicker of triumph lighting his eyes. "As solid as we had hoped. He talks about discussions on keeping certain neighborhoods under scrutiny, directives to target specific demographics disguised under crime prevention slants." Angela's heart clenched with both anger and vindication, the veneer of respectability finally worn thin enough to see the ugliness beneath. "We use this to pressure an external inquiry and bring them to account," she declared, conviction infusing her words with the resolve of 1,000 battles, fought not in fields, but in hearts. Martin adjusted his glasses, a defensive bulwark against the countless trials that surrounded them. "This information is an earthquake," he replied, confidence woven into every syllable. "If we work it right, this could lead to restructuring the entire force." They discussed tactics, how best to circulate this information without exposing Jensen to an unwarranted fallout. Each step forward was meticulously laid, the stakes a dizzying high, but they walked this path knowing retreat was not an option. Outside, amidst the dying echoes of the protests, Birmingham was far from settled. Whispers floated on the evening air, insinuations tied to hopes dreamed beneath candlelight vigils marking Elise's legacy. The city, teetering on the brink of transformation, demanded release from prejudice's historical grip. Angela felt the air shift as if the very universe hemmed in every breath, urging her onward. "We need press involvement, Martin," she said, envisioning the reach of their crusade spreading wide, the seeds of reform sown in fertile ground. "This story must stretch beyond state lines. The nation needs to learn." Martin rubbed his temple thoughtfully, acknowledging the truth in her vision. "We'll leak parts to the media, get them hooked." His eyes narrowed, focusing on the bridge between concept and execution. "But we'll need to control the narrative. Censure they ask the right questions. Demand the answers people can't ignore." Suddenly a knock interrupted their dialogue, a messenger breaking through the forced thresholds of anticipation. Jerry entered, his presence a welcome grounding force against the shared strain. He held out his phone, the alert regarding the newly exposed report illuminating the screen like an ember. "It's happening, Angie," he said, voice draped with the weight of measured hopefulness. "Reactions are pouring in. Good, but heated." Angela took the phone, absorbing the wave of responses pouring forth, each comment a brushstroke on the masterpiece they determined to craft, some voices supportive, others threatened, though none indifferent. The momentum was building, a collective heartbeat thundering in chorus. Martin stood, eyes narrowing at the impending publication. "This is it," he said, pride evident in his stature. "Today marks the place where nothing turns back, where reckoning meets resolution." Angela met his gaze, the two tied together in an invisible thread born from their entwined mission. She felt the possibilities shifting the atmosphere, coalescing into the tectonic shift Elise would be proud of. Together they were pulling history from the clutches of repetition into the realm of realignment, where even the darkest corners mustn't escape the spotlight of truth. Standing with Martin and Jerry, Angela's determination melded with the courage of those who stood and fought alongside her. They anchored their ties not in bygone grief, but in the strength of what could be, the forging of a legacy in Elise's name, and the many voices of those who had come before, and those yet to rise. Further fueled by the fire they had ignited, there was no receding storm to bide time, their path drawn out by the distant, inevitable beacon that beckoned, justice, in echoes forged anew. The clandestine meeting took place in a small, dimly lit cafe on the far edge of town, away from the scrutiny that filled the precinct like air heavy with secrets. Angela sat across from Officer Jensen, the man who carried the weight of deeply buried truths in his eyes. The corner booth enveloped them in a kind of stealthy intimacy, sheltering the gravity of their conversation from the world outside. Jensen looked different here. Stripped of the uniform's authority, his shoulders seemed less rigid, his eyes weary from battles waged internally. Angela recognized the turmoil, the gnawing doubt that lingered like a shadow behind every decision he had made to step beyond the line of silence. "Lieutenant Colonel Moore," Jensen greeted, nodding with deference that carried respect etched deeper than rank. There was caution in his voice, tempered by the resolve that had brought him to this threshold. "Thank you for meeting with me," Angela replied, maintaining direct eye contact that spoke of her sincerity. Her tone was disarming, a soldier's camaraderie when confronting shared adversity, and, for having the courage to speak up, Jensen shifted slightly in his seat, the wear of his conscience felt within every word. "I couldn't stay silent anymore. What happened to Elise?" He paused, searching for the words, layered with regret and exposure. "That was the breaking point." Angela nodded, empathy interwoven with her unyielding drive. "She was a good kid. A light taken away too soon. We can't change the past, but we must ensure her legacy." Her gaze sharpened, charged with the purpose of their meeting. "I want to know everything, Officer Jensen. Whatever you can provide will expose their injustice." Jensen released a breath, deciding to unburden himself entirely. "The documentation," he began, his voice low, like a confession made. "It details years of informal orders, profiling strategies couched as preventative measures, target lists disguised as safety protocols." Angela absorbed his words, the depravity of systematic prejudice unraveling in her mind's eye like a twisted tapestry. Her next question pressed softly. "How deep does it go, Jensen?" "The top brass is complicit," Jensen admitted, his candor illuminating dark corners of their fight. Officers were instructed to tag certain areas, mark out youth based on preconceived biases. It all ties back, piece by piece. Angela felt the fury coil within her, a visceral reaction to the injustice Elise had faced, and what countless others had silently suffered. "This is huge," she conceded, the possibility ripening into real action. "And with your testimony, we can push for an external investigation to overhaul their exploitative practices." Jensen looked down, examining his hands as if they would provide answers to questions harboring doubts. "I know the risks," he said, lifting his gaze, But this truth needs sunlight. I'm just scared of retaliation, of what may come for my family. His confession held the terror of threats lurking just beyond his words. Angela's voice softened but remained resolute. We'll protect you, Jensen. You're not alone in this. We have allies, lawyers, journalists, activists. We'll move mountains to ensure your safety. Jensen nodded appreciatively, the weight he bore seeming lighter, if only momentarily. Convinced by Angela's unwavering poise, he laid out a plan, providing avenues to the evidence, how best to utilize it without endangering himself further. As they talked, crafting a strategy born from necessity and hope, Angela saw in Jensen a glimmer, one they needed to illuminate the path toward transformation. Empowering his voice was crucial, and she was ready to guard it with unwavering ferocity. Minutes turned to hours in the haven they had carved out within the shadows. Promises exchanged over steaming cups now cooled, developing bonds that tied them intimately to justice's cause. Their meeting concluded with a handshake, a silent agreement between soldiers on the same side of an unwinnable war, only now they held a decisive advantage. Jensen left first, melting back into the city's ebb as it carried him along its current of anonymous lives and non-committal faces. Angela lingered afterward, her resolve honed to a blade's edge. A door had opened, and with it, possibilities unfurled like petals. Elise's name whispered through the city, the echo far-reaching, gathering momentum with each shared story, each stand taken. Angela knew it would soon reach those safeguarded by illusions cloaked in authority, a warning, and a promise that truth, indeed, was coming. The courtroom was once again a theater of expectations, charged with palpable tension that buzzed like an electric current coursing through the assembled crowd. Angela sat beside Martin at the prosecution's table, the strategy they had crafted sitting like an arrow keenly ready in the bow of justice. Today, a fracture within the department's silent armor was about to be exploited, and the world was watching. Officer Jensen's appearance in uniform was a bold contrast to the secrets he was about to unveil. His brow glistened under the harsh lighting, but there was a steadiness in his step, an acknowledgement of the gravity of his choice as he walked toward the witness stand. Angela watched him closely, understanding the enormous courage it took to stand where he did, poised to disturb the balance of power with truth's relentless edge. The courtroom hushed as Jensen took his oath, settling into the chair with a resolution that masked his internal disquiet. Proceedings commenced with the usual formalities, the judge overseeing with an expression of solemnity that seemed to acknowledge the weight of every word spoken here today. Martin rose, his face a tapestry of composed focus, unrolling the strategy they had meticulously laid out as he approached the witness stand. "Officer Jensen," he began, his voice carrying every person in the room to the brink of revelation. "Can you explain to the court what the culture within the Birmingham Police Department has been, particularly concerning racial profiling and biased policing?" There was a pause, a communion of shared breath, as Jensen gathered his thoughts, steeling himself against the implications of his testimony. He knew his words would shatter the facade carefully built over years of systemic manipulation. "Yes, I can," Jensen affirmed, his voice steady, resonating in the silence left behind. "There has been an unofficial directive to monitor specific neighborhoods more closely, influenced by assumptions about criminal activity based purely on racial composition." A collected gasp echoed softly through the rows of spectators, cascading waves of indignation and disbelief punctuating the fragile atmosphere. Angela watched the jurors, their expressions rapidly shifting from curiosity to focused attention, a signal that Jensen's revelation had struck home. "Please, go on," Martin prompted gently, the room holding its collective breath. Jensen continued, drawing from the reservoir of experiences bottled up inside. These practices were justified as preventative measures, yet they were nothing but institutionalized prejudice. We were encouraged to keep tabs and target individuals just because they fit a particular profile. Angela's eyes flicked to the defense, noting the taut lines of their lawyer's forehead as they furiously scribbled notes. It was the unraveling they had feared, a breach in their long-standing silence that challenged the truth of their practices. Martin's voice was composed, yet pulsed with determination. "And can you confirm if specific events leading up to the incident involving Elise Moore were dictated by such profiling?" His question was a projectile, hitting at the heart of every reason Angela sat here today. "Yes," Jensen confirmed quietly, yet his words slammed into the courtroom like a thunderclap. Elise was stopped as part of a targeted operation based on these profiling tactics. Despite there being no legitimate grounds, Angela inhaled deeply, feeling the truth interlace with her heart as Jensen laid bare the final strands of deceit. It felt like time stretched infinitely in his revelation, a yawning chasm that exposed the root of injustice she had fought so hard to unearth. The courtroom seemed alive, with whispered shockwaves rolling back across seats, glancing off wooden surfaces. Each affirmation from Jensen struck another chord in the discordant symphony playing out among those who held tightly to complacency's lies. Angela watched Jensen step away from the stand, no longer just an officer, but an ally to their quest for justice. It was a testament to the power of conviction, a moment signaling hope, even within the murkiness of entrenched bias. The judge called for a recess, and as murmurs swept the room, Angela felt a heavy thread of elation coil through her veins. She turned to Martin, who met her gaze with a nod of tempered triumph. They had taken a critical step, one that could not be easily backtracked, and the door to genuine reform now stood ajar. Standing amidst the ebb of legal enclave, Angela knew the battle was far from over. But today they had witnessed the fault lines of systemic injustice revealed under the weight of truths often silenced, now roaring for acknowledgement. With Jensen's testimony unfurled, justice beckoned closer, a testament to a mother's indomitable love and a community's relentless pursuit of change. The air outside the courtroom was crisp with the onset of dusk, the horizon a blaze of reds and golds as though the sky itself were bearing witness to the tremors of change resonating through Birmingham. Angela stood with Martin on the courthouse steps, their spirits buoyed by the morning's revelations. Around them the crowd gathered like an insistent tide, their collective energy a powerful reminder of the shared cause that continued to beckon them forward. As reporters jostled for position, Angela surveyed the sea of determined faces, each one etched with the stony resolve of those who refused to be silent any longer. Among them, familiar allies, friends, and the faces of strangers who had taken up the mantle of Elise's fight with an unyielding fervor. A podium had been set just beyond the courthouse steps, microphones bristling like attentive sentinels ready to capture the narrative Angela was determined to carve into the world. Martin nodded towards it, a silent cue that the stage was hers once more. Angela stepped forward, the hush of expectation following her movement like a shadow. She gripped the sides of the podium, the cool metal grounding the fervor within her. The cameras clicked, the crowd's murmur crescendoed, and then fell back into a listening silence as she began to speak. "Today we took a significant step." Angela's voice rang clear, the declaration resonant against the backdrop of anticipation. "Thanks to the bravery of Officer Jensen, we revealed what many of us have known for far too long, that the system has been broken, skewed, and unjust." A wave of cheering erupted, rolling through the assembly, invigorating each person with a renewed sense of determination. Angela waited for silence with the practiced patience of a soldier who knew the value of each pause, each moment poised at the brink of transformation. "We stand here united," she continued, her words threading through the crowd with seamless authority, "and we will not yield, not until justice for my daughter, for Elise, is realized, and not until we reshape policing into an entity that protects all citizens equally." Applause followed, louder now, a wave of affirmation that surged across the faces turned toward her. Angela saw partner's eyes in the distance. Jerry standing with Elise's friends, faces lit by the last of the day's glory. "We are not alone in this," Angela urged, her voice carrying over the cacophony that stilled to absorb her every syllable. "With the evidence, with your voices, with this movement, a revolution always starts small but grows unstoppable." From the crowd, a chant erupted, swelling from one voice to many, a refrain of hope and unity. "Justice for Elise!" echoed across the crowd, bouncing off the courthouse walls, weaving through city streets until it touched every corner of their community. Angela stood back from the podium, allowing the chant to wash over her, through her. It was validation from every soul who had endured, who had suffered by an indifferent system now laid bare under their unflinching gaze. Beside her, Martin nodded, his expression grave yet etched with hope as they rejoined the crowd, blending seamlessly into the fabric of their shared purpose. Each step forward was one more victory towards a better tomorrow, a world where Elise's legacy would light the way. Yet even amidst this bright horizon, shadows lurked. The hardened resistance of those entrenched in maintaining the status quo, whispers of sedition from those now forced into confrontation with the truths they could no longer deny. As twilight settled, figures swayed, worn yet unbeaten, moving with purpose through the heart of Birmingham. Days ahead remained fraught with battles visible and unseen, but with proof unraveling myths, each unburdened truth brought with it the certainty of change edging nearer. Angela walked with Jerry, her hand finding his, in a shared promise of strength, a promise made not just to each other, but to Elise, and to every person gathered beneath the star-speckled sky. The city hummed with their resolve, a living testament that whilst the road remained challenging, they were prepared to march its length, guided by the truths unearthed today and the voices that demanded tomorrow must be carved from justice's purest stone. As they turned the corner toward home, Angela felt the stirring of something profound, a connection to those who had fought before her and those who would continue onward, a tapestry of relentless love, unbreakable and infinite. The sound of thunderous applause still lingered like an echo in the air as Angela closed the door behind her, leaving the cacophony of the rally behind. Back inside the familiar sanctum of her home, the ambiance felt different tonight, softened by a sense of renewed purpose that had become her shield and sword. The living room was warmly lit, the scent of freshly brewed tea wafting through the air. Jerry sat on the couch, eyes closed, head resting back as if trying to absorb the energy from the day's events. There was a peacefulness there, not from weariness, but from the satisfaction of having moved mountains, or at least begun to. Angela crossed the room, settling beside him, resting her head on his shoulder, a gesture etched with the intimacy of years, shared both in celebration and strife. For a moment, she allowed herself to be held soundlessly against the backdrop of the hum that still thrummed through their veins like a second heartbeat. "They heard us," Jerry murmured, a hint of awe lacing his voice, though it came from a place of profound understanding. "They truly heard us today." Angela smiled faintly, reaching for his hand, fingers interlacing with a simplicity that spoke volumes. "And they're with us all the way," she replied, each word infused with the certainty only a day like today could solidify. Elise would be so proud. Jerry turned to her, his presence a comforting anchor. "She's with us more than ever. I could feel it today." Every voice out there was partly hers. Angela nodded, eyes glistening with the warmth of shared remembrance. The effort they were part of now spanned beyond the realms of their small family, infused with the determination of countless lives intertwined, each a chapter of pain turned into a manifesto for change. A soft knock at the door drew them from their reverie, the disturbance a reminder that the work of justice was demanding and unending. Angela rose reluctantly, but with resolve, moving to welcome their late-night visitor, a bearer of news, of solidarity, of the next steps in their battle. Martin stood at the threshold, the faint glow of streetlights casting shadows across his features. His presence was imbued with purpose, a testament to the camaraderie and struggle that had bound them so tightly together. Angela motioned him inside, recognizing the gravity etched into his usually composed demeanor. "Sorry to come by so late," Martin started, the words tumbling quietly into the room. "I thought it was best to talk in person." He looked between Angela and Jerry, their resilience evident in a room saturated with quiet determination. Angela offered him a seat, and with a nod, Martin accepted, leaning forward slightly and clasping his hands, his eyes holding a fire not unlike her own. "There's something you both should know." He paused, heavy with the weight of what he was about to disclose. "I've heard from my contacts, higher-ups within the mayor's office are considering yielding to our demands." Angela exchanged a glance with Jerry, hope flickering on the edge of her vision. "What exactly does that mean for us?" she asked cautiously, knowing the line between consideration and action was as fine as it was fickle. Martin's eyes were intense, every word measured and precise. They're considering an independent investigation putting pressure on the precinct to reform, but they're hesitant, pressure from unions and certain factions roiling beneath the surface. "Who they're waiting?" Jerry interjected, annoyance woven through his otherwise calm tenor. "They're observing," Martin replied, an understanding yet fervent glint in his eyes, assessing what further pressure from public opinion might push them over the edge. "We caught their attention, but they want to be certain the tide has indeed turned." Angela nodded slowly, processing the implications. "Which means we must continue," she stated, the resolve shifting the air with her declaration. "More rallies, more voices amplifying our demand until their resistance crumbles." Martin leaned back, the weight temporarily lifting off his shoulders. "We're getting closer than ever. They struggle to ignore us, Angela. They fear the type of change we're bringing." A quiet determination unfolded between them, every promise carved from resilience and crafted into the determination binding them. Tonight, their path was refueled by potential victory, a clearer outline of what Elisa's legacy might become beneath their relentless pursuit. The conversation shifted to logistics, to the next steps in their crusade as hours ebbed and flowed quietly around them. Strategies drawn, angles explored, avenues to pursue, all to build upon the momentum they had seeded. Yes, they were closing in on the reforms that would transform their city, their country, a response forged from the resolute heart of Birmingham. As Martin departed, Angela stood once more with Jerry in the stillness of their home. The protest's echoes seeped through the walls, a reminder of beginnings and best-laid plans, grounded in loyalty and belief. For now, Angela could relinquish the weight of the world from her shoulders, if only for tonight. She leaned against the doorway, her eyes soft with possibilities netted from the day's triumphs and "Yes, we're getting there," she whispered, as if to affirm her own strength. In the twinkling darkness, she remained anchored, heart steady with the truth of what lay ahead, where hope became a living force, powered by the enduring legacy of their collective voice. The dawn rose like an unsung promise over Birmingham, its first light casting a hopeful glow on a city poised for transformation. Angela found herself standing outside the precinct, the day's chill invigorating, a sense of momentum pounding through her every step. Today they were going to witness the initial concessions, the first tangible strides towards justice and reform. The precinct's exterior was unassuming, but Angela felt its walls vibrating with the static energy of the subtly shifting winds of change. News of the possible reforms had leaked, and today was the day these promises would be tested for their veracity. A crowd had gathered, bolstered by curiosity and the urgency that braced the city, a mosaic of people united in solidarity. Angela saw familiar faces, rally veterans who had shed the shadows of doubt, now standing proudly under the light of what was to come. Jerry stood near, his presence a comforting reassurance amidst the crowd. She wove her way through the throng, feeling the hum of shared anticipation, each individual holding an ember of hope waiting to burst into flame. Each step towards the entrance marked another step towards the rebuilding of trust, the tearing down of walls long upheld by systems that turned a blind eye to inequality. Beside the building, a makeshift platform had been set up, Mayor Evelyn Harris standing before a podium, flanked by city officials. Hers was a face often seen in headlines, but today she appeared earnest, seemingly aware of the gravity riding the outcomes they were there to announce. Angela felt her heart steady within her chest as she joined her fellow advocates near the front, their combined energy a tide ready to receive the words that might define a new era for their fractured community. The press, too, was out in force, cameras trained, microphones thrust forward, in a convergence of lit lenses and ethical curiosity. Mayor Harris cleared her throat, hands gripping the sides of the podium as she began to speak, her voice calm but carrying the heavy burden of consequence. "Today, we acknowledge that we have reached a pivotal point," she began, her gaze sweeping the assembly like a harbinger of hope. "Thanks to the voices, the relentless voices, of individuals like Angela Moore and those among you, we can no longer ignore the call for change." There was a spark through the crowd, a subtle but collective sigh of relief as words translated into recognition, a crucial first admission from the powers once indifferent. Harris continued, presenting directives mandated following Jensen's explosive testimony. "We will initiate an independent investigation into the practices that have eroded confidence and distorted duty's purpose. The Commission will ensure that our policing practices become models of equality, fairness, and justice." The crowd erupted into applause, a living pulse of relief and validation. Angela felt it surge through her, intensifying every hope clutched tightly since the day Elise was taken. Yet even in triumph's gentle glow, she clung to tempered expectations, a readiness for the challenges that remained. The mayor recounted intentions for comprehensive officer training in racial sensitivity and bias oversight, a council interfacing with community leaders, and the renewal of policies governing accountability. Behind her, other officials nodded solemnly. Whether in genuine agreement or under pressure, it remained to be seen. Angela met Jerry's gaze, finding mirrored triumph there, a triumph that only hinted at the profound possibilities these changes could usher in. Together, they stood under the sun, bodies etched in collaborative strength, a testament to the distance they had traveled to arrive here. "We have work ahead of us," Harris concluded, her voice reflecting both urgency and resolve. "But today is proof that Birmingham will no longer stand back. We will build a legacy of justice, rooted in equality." Her words buoyed the gathered hearts, each soul resolute in the tangled web of reform offered to them. As the mayor stepped down, Angela knew the discourse surrounding these nascent reforms would grow complex, that further vigilance was necessary to ensure promises would become reality and not dissipate into bureaucratic quagmires. Yet within her chest, Angela felt its lightness that belied the density of weight lifted, an ember of hope ignited within them all. She recognized the journey wasn't over. Rather, it was in its vibrant dawn, pressing forward with a community determined to construct what Elise had envisioned beneath their unified strength. With voices united, as ever, they pledged to carry forward, forging an era written in no faded ink but with the indelible fire of shared purpose, a future twined to the new Birmingham where justice was not sporadic but a right assured, universal and unwavering. Beside her, Angela felt the warmth of Jerry's hand squeeze hers, a gesture of reassurance in their shared awareness they were architects amid a new dawn's gleaming arrival. The reverberations of Mayor Harris's announcement traveled far beyond the precinct, spilling into the social media feeds and conversations around the city. Angela's phone buzzed incessantly with messages of congratulations, support, and determined questions about the next steps after this promising yet nascent victory. For Angela, there was no time to bask. Every success required more action, more vigilance. Angela sat at her dining room table, surrounded by a landscape of maps, notes, and strategic plans. Each document was a stepping stone towards ensuring that the promises made at the precinct were not just empty words, but the foundation for systemic change. The reform was fragile, a tender shoot exposed to the uprise and tempest of circling interests, each vying for influence over the shaping landscape. Her mind was sharpened by determination, crafting letters to community leaders, drafting proposals for oversight committees, and liaising with allies who joined their cause, not as footnotes to a campaign, but authors in a narrative they'd begun to reshape. A sudden knock at the door pulled her from the marathon of thought, the soft sound reverberating against the solid quietude of her home. She rose, ready to meet the next involvement with the same steely resolve that had become her armor. Opening the door, she found herself face to face with Senator Donovan Langley, a man whose career had been a study in political balancing. His arrival was unexpected but not unwelcome. It was a testament to the ripples their movement was making, drawing into its orbit figures of influence seeking alignment or opportunity. "Senator Langley," Angela greeted, her gaze steady, discerning intent from the lines etched across his features. Mostly known for his center-ground stances, any decisive lean made by him would reverberate through state politics. "Lieutenant Colonel Moore," Langley replied, offering a courteous nod. "I hope I'm not intruding." Angela stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "I'd say you're just in time. We're on the brink of something significant, change that can extend well beyond Birmingham." The senator settled into her living room with all the air of a man accustomed to authority, though Angela felt their shared understanding was governed by mutual respect rather than deference. "You and Martin Reeves have caused quite a stir," Langley stated, half smiling, his words a proxy to his admiration. "What you've achieved is impressive, and it's gaining broad attention." Angela remained guarded, aware that political figures like Langley weighed every word. "Birmingham's journey is just the beginning. We need enduring solutions, realignments of power structures not only here, but nationally." Langley leaned forward, steepling his fingers, the moment pregnant with candor. "Consider me an ally, Angela. There's room here to drive state-level reform, with your expertise guiding legislation through the corridors of power. We can push for policies echoing what Birmingham's committed to implement." Her attention piqued. Angela assessed his offer, not just for the weight of the words themselves, but for the potential to expand their battlefront. "If you can promise me this," she ventured, "that the reforms won't morph in committee from necessity to compromise, I'll work diligently beside you." Langley nodded, his expression taut with understanding. "Real change demands bold measures, Angela. You have my commitment to stand firmly with you, ensuring we balance bureaucracy with necessity." Angela felt the forge glow hot within her, the possibility to make lasting change presented by the senator's support. It was a tool she was prepared to wield, only under the condition of unyielding fidelity to their mission. "Then let's work together," Angela declared, the statement a handshake sealed in purpose. "But know this, Senator, this movement can't withstand the spotlight merely for symbolic gestures. We'll need concrete steps, your voice echoing in chambers not privy to our struggle's cries." Langley absorbed her words with the weight of one carried forward by mutual intent. He was reminded these reforms were neither a balm nor a bandage, but a blueprint for structural reinvention. Their work, infused with the urgency of lives marked by prejudice, demanded more than policy. It required a pledge, still fresh with conviction. As Langley departed, Angela stood at her doorway, eyes sweeping the horizon. The collaboration she had struck felt immense, stretching forth her vision, one Elise had ignited, now fanned by the flames of coalition, uncompromised by the veneer of gratitude. Returning to her notes, Angela's mind buzzed with plans and dialogues, dreams given a political arena to manifest. The day stretched ahead, woven with ink and determination, promising a trajectory aligned with justice carved mightily beneath the weight of truth-told narratives. For Angela, For Birmingham, for Elise, the fight had just broadened its path, one more step towards the future they envisioned, shining brightly from beyond the storm. Each second a testament to resolve and unwavering resilience. The precinct buzzed with an unfamiliar energy. The usual crispness of uniforms and clatter of day-to-day routine now played against a background score of tension and expectation. Inside, Angela felt the eyes on her, a mix of respect and wary curiosity following her every step. Her presence, once an unheard challenge, now carried the weight of change, a woman's determination leaving seismic disturbances in a once unyielding foundation. Angela was here for a closed-door meeting, a session not steeped in formality, but punctuated by the candid realities that had unfurled since Jensen's testimony. Today was about alignment, or, if needed, defiance. The kind of decisions she was all too familiar with. Captain Rick Matheson, a veteran who wore the burden of his office through weary eyes and a resolute jaw set against responsibilities, met her inside his sparse corner office. His handshake, firm almost to the point of challenge, conveyed the multitude of emotions converging at this juncture: duty, apprehension, and the stirrings of plausible reform. "Lieutenant Colonel Moore," Matheson greeted, his tone measured and dipped in an understated acknowledgment of her role in Birmingham's unfolding chapter. "We seem to have found ourselves at an intersection." Angela held his gaze, allowing a quiet unequivocality to answer him beyond words' reach. "Captain, it's in our hands to turn this intersection into a pathway toward accountability and trust." Matheson nodded, a deliberation clouding his brow. "There are those within these walls, resistant to change. They see it as a threat rather than progress." "I understand," Angela replied, her voice a calm stillness amidst the media frenzy. "Change is threatening when one is invested in the status quo, but we ask for reform, for transparency, guiding us towards a professional integrity founded in community trust." Her words were weapons honed on fields beyond paperwork, where the battle lines were drawn not with guns but with truth sharpened into public demand. Matheson leaned back in his chair, digesting this, aware of the historical fracturing heightened by current societal upheavals. "It won't be easy," Matheson mused, chains of command echoing in his tone. But beneath it, Angela sensed a kindred spirit, bent on ushering transformation despite its cost. "Resistance is deeply rooted," Angela nodded, acknowledging the enormity. "We're not naive to the scale, Captain, but it's worth fighting for. We need the police serving the community, not patrolling from suspicion and prejudice." A silence unraveled between them, woven with the weight of truths needing action, resonating from corridors long held in silent complicity. Matheson broke it with an offer, insight steering from official channels to personal creed. "I want to help bridge this gap. If we can start retraining with experienced bias educators and regular community interface sessions, coupled with real-time accountability measures," Matheson offered, "there's a chance static perspectives could evolve." Angela met his gaze with a nod, respect charging her voice as she spoke. "That's a commitment I can back, fully. Each officer's legacy lies in their oath to protect, and their accountability begins with them." The plan sketched and agreed upon in ink became more than points on a feudal map. They moved here, in concert, towards reparation, not just for glory-seeking, but for laying bricks of future pathways founded on respect. As their conversation drew to a close, Angela left the conference room, carrying with her not just possibility, but a stratagem newly augmented with collective promise. Walking through the precinct, guarded glances affirmed her impact. Muted, curious, disdainful, respectful, a choir of chaos replaced only by unity yet to emerge. Outside, the city pulsed with movement. Life endures whether wrapped in conflict or peacetime solace. The precinct's shadow shrouded less malevolence now, perhaps not by incident, but the light required constant vigilance to retain its shaping force. Angela felt the heft of unity as she returned to her car, buoyed by the turning wheels of trust rewound around them, working through a world yet unfinished. She would continue to forge forward, where knowledge became light and in its blaze, Lisa's spark would linger, a glow in insulation's darkened corridor, louder than ever. Jerry met her embrace as she exited, sharing in the victory not measured by official decree, but woven through sincerity of shared battle. As they embraced, the world continued its spinning dance. But today their position demanded reflection, alignment, a harmony yet to crescendo beyond Echo's promise. Stretching out before them lay steps forged forward, steeped in human dignity, pursued even as the whole picture remained unfinished. A mural in progress that generations would come to recognize as proof against doubting probability. For now, the horizon called painted red as the legacy of yesterday bled into the dawn of tomorrow, a silent promise embedded to illuminate the path they'd only just begun to walk together. The sky over Birmingham was a canvas of deep blues and purples, stars faintly emerging in celebration of another hard-fought day. Angela found herself on the front lines once more, not amid towering cityscapes or courtrooms, but here in Kelly's Park, where it had all begun. The rally tonight felt electric, charged with the shared invincibility of a community galvanized by triumph and tempered by endurance. The crowd gathered in a pulse of voices, a living testament to their unwavering conviction. Angela stood among them, heart beating in time with the collective chorus ringing through the night. Handwritten signs lifted high bore messages of hope and defiance, their proximity amplifying their cry for a justice long overdue. Each phrase etched on paper erupted like an anthem to a fight that was far from over. The platform was modest yet firm, a locus from which words could call forth revolutions. As Angela prepared to ascend, Jerry remained by her side, his presence a guiding light amidst the stars now mirroring their fight. "You ready?" he asked, his voice imbued with the serenity that countered the chaos brewing in realms unseen. "I am," Angela nodded, affirming their pact without yielding to doubt. Her spirit stood unshaken, deterrence grappling beneath the surface, but not breaking it. "We need to keep pushing, Jer. The world needs to keep seeing." The introductory speeches ebbed and flowed, each speaker leaving an indelible mark, a rallying call echoing through the air like the rhythm of ancestors cheering them on. Candles flickered to life across the expanse, constellations crafted by gentle hands, each flame a story untold until now, a lament transfigured to hope alight. As Angela took the stage, the crowd hushed to a palpable silence, the weight of expectation hovering through the night with bated breath. She surveyed the sea of faces, a mosaic of resolve and resilience, honed over marches and shared burdens, her pulse syncopated with their ethos, a combined narrative underscoring collective transformation. "My friends," Angela's voice carried across the park, a beacon in the night, "we've walked far from when we first gathered here, our voices trembling yet fiercely steadfast. Today we stand, feet entrenched in this very earth for our right to demand change, beyond promise, beyond mere gestures." The crowd erupted in applause, a tsunami of emotions surging over their collective shoulders, entwined with the promise forged in unity. She paused, honoring Elise, her mind echoing with the words that had fueled this relentless journey. Sunset's glow bowed to the stillness of night, yet Angela's passion burned brighter than the coziness of darkness waiting upon the horizon. "Our journey is not complete," she continued, grounding their fight in truths unearthed and battles won. "The promises we hear today must propel real change, imported not from conversations distant, but lived realities within these streets. We've set a course, and we refuse to drift back or be neglected." Angela's mind drifted to the challenges ahead, legal hoops and whispered threats cornering possibilities bred by fear's false authority, eager to bind the freedoms she sought. With every step, with every voice raised, we ignite a light that injustice cannot bear. Recognition flickered amongst the crowd, embers kindled by conviction. They were witness and participant embroiled in decisions made in envelopment and perspective transcending measure. Angela expanded her vision beyond Kelly's Park, to every city riding this wave, to every voice speaking truth, transferring perseverance through the ether. With her concluding words, Angela sought the sublime simplicity of Elisa's vision for a future unburdened by prejudice's shadows. Let us promise to build a city where accountability fosters trust, and trust fosters an unyielding promise of justice. The air buzzed with cries of approval as applause reverberated. Echoing against the structures bearing legacy's shadow, Angela stepped back, breathing deeply. This moment's urgency settled within her marrow, urging her onward. As dawn broke the skyline, brushing the city with complexion's range, Angela and Jerry joined hands, descendant not from fear, but determined strides defined by purpose, their silhouettes edged by fire and resolve. Thus, as another rally closed upon this arc's page, Angela stood anchored within, lifting each hope, each cry, empowered by honor, driven by dreams, raised aloft amid stars, shining serenely, steadfast. They would press forward, and side by side, write history anew, protected by the legacy of those who had come before and empowered by those who would follow. The day of the major protest dawned with a cloudless blue sky, as if the universe itself sought to bear witness to an uprising that was poised on the cusp of being historic. Angela gazed out over Kelly's Park from her vantage at the makeshift platform, the grounds a vibrant tapestry of voices and convictions entwined in unity. She felt the hum of anticipation vibrating through the crowd, a symphony composed of shared grievances, hopes, and an unrelenting demand for change. The park was alive with energy, people pouring in from streets and neighborhoods beyond the city, drawn to the pulse of Birmingham's swelling chorus. The banners, painted with messages of resilience, fluttered in the gentle breeze, carrying their defiant truths on the wind. Around her, the scene unfolded as a tableau of collective aspiration, ready to redefine what justice looked like in their community. Angela took in the faces gathered before her, a sea of determination underpinned by the frustrations and desires of 1,000 lives connected by this singular cause. Children perched upon shoulders offering their fresh-faced ideals, elders with decades of stories woven into the fabric of their souls, and every age and background in between. United in purpose, they were a mass of dreams weaving through the air, forming a brilliant quilt of intention. Beside her stood Martin, a steadfast partner in this struggle, a reflection of the legal and moral battle they fought. Today represented a climax of effort, a culmination of policies and people drawn into the fold, with every step taken since Elisa's death. His words earlier had perfectly framed their mission as not just a march for justice, but for transformation, the kind that resonated through personal and communal legacy. Angela took the microphone with all the assurance of an architect surveying a future carefully designed and passionately crafted. Her heart raced with adrenaline, surging through her veins as if echoing every footfall of those who joined this journey. "Today we stand as one," Angela's voice rang out, amplified across the masses. Her declaration was a call to action, every word threaded with the power of shared struggle. "Let our voices rise collectively, with strength reaching to the furthest shadows, demanding not just progress but realization." The crowd responded, applause and shouts of agreement rolling in waves that ebbed and flowed, fueling the fire of determination. The energy was palpable, a living entity holding within it the aspirations not just for justice in name, but for cultural rebirth, a systems-wide metamorphosis, Angela continued, casting her words like seeds upon fertile ground. "This is our moment to insist upon accountability, not tomorrow, but today, to ensure our demands are met not in distant whispers, but in actionable decrees that honor and forge respect." The park fair warmed and uplifted by a strength unparalleled as bodies pressed closer, no longer strangers but kin linked by intent taught through suffering, boiling now toward something purer. The echoes of Angela's invocation formed a rhythmic pulse, transcending mere bodies into an army wielding transformation. As speaker after speaker took the stage, each voice was a component of the multifaceted story, with narratives twisted into collaborative force. Token voices punctuated the rally, the soulful renditions of those who fought invisibly in court, school, and household halls were now center stage, beautifully etched in memory. The crowd swelled with renewed energy, powered not solely by words, but by the silent commitment that change, steady, unstoppable, and necessary, was flowing from their collective endeavor. Angela saw it in every determined face, the way some clasped hands, others singing in tune to the anthems of freedom and equity interspersed throughout. With every chant and every surge of resolve, Angela felt the resonance of Elisa's spirit, never distant, but vibrant in every word spoken, every pledge made. The legacy she sought to forge was now a shared endeavor, a crescendo of hope's refrain. The climax built, each voice melded into one encompassing chant, a call that rang across Birmingham but echoed well beyond, demanding to dissolve into the bones of every institution. Justice for all. Justice for Elise. As the sun began its slow descent, bathing the park in hues of amber and gold, Angela knew this was more than the conclusion of a rally. It was an evolution, a promise graven into the annals of a city and a people who had refused to yield. Standing there, hand in hand with Jerry, the anthem still lingered long after the last echo faded, a testament to what had been and what would be. They had succeeded not just in making themselves heard, but in making themselves unignorable, a force for change that would ripple outward in waves to places unseen. Angela took a deep breath, looking over the dispersing crowd, understanding that this fight was the blending of many chapters. Arms linked, determined gazes turned to tomorrow, no longer bystanders but authors in a history vibrantly recast by those daring enough to dream it into existence. The reverberations of the rally continued to pulse through Birmingham into the night, its echoes threading through the city's shadowed alleys and brightly lit avenues. It was a time of potential, shimmering just beneath the surface, waiting to be transformed into something tangible. Angela found herself restless, the magnitude of the day's success energizing her thoughts and propelling her forward. But in the quiet of her home, when the adrenaline began to ebb and the silence pressed in, Angela knew that the victory was tenuous, and had set in motion reactions not all of them benign. Her phone buzzed with incessant alerts, notifications of support, pledges of assistance, and the inevitable backlash. She scrolled through the messages, most promising solidarity, while others issued veiled threats or attempts at intimidation. A reminder of the opposition clinging to remnants of a status quo they had pledged to dismantle. Pinned among these calls to action was a priority update from Martin. With practiced resolve, she opened the message, its lines inundated with urgency and revelation. The governor's office had taken notice, pushed by the groundswell of support and scrutiny brought by the day's events. There was chatter of an influence campaign underway, orchestrated by those entrenched within the existing power structures, an attempt to derail the reforms and maintain control under the guise of maintaining order. Angela's pulse quickened. Every advance seemed to provoke a sinister response, a reminder that their struggle was as ideological as it was practical, a battle waged not only in courts of law but in hearts and minds. She had anticipated retaliation, but wished beyond hope it wouldn't manifest this soon. Calling Martin, her fingers felt heavy against the keys, weighted with determination and the pressure wrought by victory now under threat. He answered promptly, the background noise of his office a familiar backdrop. "Angela," he greeted, his voice clipped with urgency. "I saw the summary," she began, cutting to the core of their concern. "What do we know about the situation with the governor?" Martin sighed, a sigh heard through vast experience. "They're playing a long game, trying to convince key figures that any significant change poses a threat to stability. They're inviting influential voices to support their narrative, claiming it's all a matter of security." Angela listened, feeling determination harden into a fierce resolve. Security, a facade as always. They're trying to keep us caught in their cycle, draw attention away with the specter of chaos. Exactly. Martin agreed, conviction lighting his words. "They're hoping to sow doubt, make resistance seem unmanageable." Angela took a deep breath, rallying the strength that had brought her this far. "We need to counter this, Martin, thoroughly and decisively. If they want to paint us as destabilizing elements, we need to show them that our stability comes from the strength and unity of the movement." Martin's voice resonated with agreement. "We'll have to lay it all out, highlight the support we've gathered, the plans we've detailed for reform, the testimonials from those impacted by the policies. Elise's legacy is challenging." Angela nodded, reinforcing her internal vow to resist the tide of obstruction. "And we focus on the community's voice, amplifying their stories, their truths." With a clear agreement struck, Angela ended the call, her mind swirling with the threads she needed to weave into a tapestry undeniable. It was a fight they knew they had to upend by transforming the narratives that power had long shielded from change. The gravity of the night enveloped her, a silent firmness resting upon the shoulders of those who stood ready on the forefront. She felt the weight, yet defied it, motivated by every life drawn into their camaraderie of conviction. This was no ordinary endeavor, no fleeting concern to be placated with token gestures. Instead, it was a living, breathing movement, drawing its strength from history's lessons and a determination to inscribe a future replete with justice. As Angela gazed out into the city illuminated by night's gentle embrace, she felt the power of Elise's presence, a legacy urging her forward. The choice to seize this opportunity, rebut the waves of aimless intimidation, was one she welcomed, protecting not only her daughter's memory, but nurturing the promise of change, uncanny and riveting, they had strived to cultivate together. Gathering her thoughts, Angela prepared to fortify their position against the unseen forces seeking to unravel what had been so painstakingly achieved. She understood the importance of staying vigilant, of using every tool they had cultivated. Each voice, each ally would now become the shield and spear needed for the path ahead, the journey toward justice and transformation, unyielding and resolute. The dawn would come again, inevitable as it was inexorable, illuminating the way for Angela and all those who walked with her under the banner born of light, a promise tangibly tied to possibility and truth indisputable by anything adversity dared contrive. Angela woke to a morning shrouded in overcast skies, fitting for the uncertain atmosphere that had settled over Birmingham. The hustle of the city was muted, as if holding its breath, waiting to see if the promises of reform would take root or dissolve into the machinations of politics. The press had been relentless, their headlines running the gamut from hopeful to skeptical, each interpretation reflecting the precarious tightrope Angela and her allies now walked. As she sipped her coffee, eyes scanning the headlines, Angela's phone buzzed with an alert that set her heart pounding. A major court ruling was expected today, a culmination of the legal machinations they had set in motion. Martin had notified her that the judge was ready to release a decision on the eligibility of the independent oversight committee they had petitioned for, a critical component in their strategy to safeguard justice and ensure police accountability. Angela's fingers hovered over her phone, the anticipation almost tangible. Then, spurred by determination, she dialed Martin's number. Her resolve echoed in the steady beeps as she waited. "Angela," Martin answered, his voice carrying the tension that mirrored her own. "What's the latest?" she asked, cutting to the core of their shared anticipation. "The judge's ruling comes down today," Martin replied, the words taut with cautious optimism. "If it goes our way, it grants us the leverage we need. External eyes on internal affairs to prevent more cover-ups." Angela exhaled slowly, feeling the full weight of the moment. "And if it doesn't?" Martin hesitated, then spoke with determined frankness. "Then we recalibrate, use the public's fervor to pressure changes. But I sense we've got momentum on our side, Angela. People have risen in Elisa's name. It's not so easily dismissed." She nodded, buoyed by the hope and perseverance that had brought them to this brink. "We'll keep fighting, whatever comes." Angela spent the rest of the morning engaged in quiet preparation, considering every contingency. She reviewed notes, revisited strategies, weaving together the people and plans that had become her lifeline. Each paper held significance: roadmaps of protest, testimony for trials, a counterweight against forces she refused to concede to. Midday arrived with little warning, and so too did the ruling. A notification flashed, and Angela's pulse quickened. A message from Martin. "Ruling's out. Meet us at the steps of the courthouse. It's in our favor." Relief threaded through her veins like a lifeline, the edges of her vision sharpening with clarity and intent. After all the struggles, here was a tangible victory, an emblem of what was possible when truth was wielded with relentless conviction. Her smile was one of triumph, a hard-won sense of justice, breaking through the persistent doubt that had gnawed at her. As Angela arrived at the courthouse, she was met by Martin, Jerry, and a throng of supporters whose spirits soared, buoyed by the news. The steps buzzed with activity, the media capturing the vibrant pulse of an energized community. The air crackled with anticipation, propelled by determination to hold leadership to their assurances. The Oversight Committee will review claims of misconduct and institute measures of transparency, Martin explained, his words resonant with determination. "This is not just a win for us, Angela. It's a win for every community calling for accountability." Cheers erupted from the gathered crowd, their collective joy echoing against the courthouse walls, soaring to touch the heavens. Angela turned to see faces alight, with an acknowledgement that what they sought was not just an ideal, but a possible reality. Across generations, the connections bridged unspoken pledges renewed through this hard-fought journey. Angela took a moment, absorbing the scene, the tears of relief, the hands resting gently over hearts, the fists raised high in unwavering solidarity. For a brief instant, the trials of the past felt lighter, the future beaming with possibility. As Angela addressed the crowd assembled in triumph, she drew strength not just from her vision, but from the legacy willed into her hands by Elise and countless others. "This victory is ours," she declared, her voice ringing like a bell's clear toll. "It's the beginning of what we can achieve when we refuse to let injustice silence us." A stream of cheers and applause washed over her, buoyed by the strength drawn as a singular force, a promise etched in human spirit, one surmounting fear and prejudice. Angela accepted each accolade with humility, knowing well the path ahead remained intricate. As the light faded, evening setting in, a newfound assurance settled with the twilight. The darkness was no longer shrouded in mystery or doubt. It was an ally, a testament to battles fought and ground gained. They had defied the expectations set by doubt, progressing with resilience and determination. Tonight, surrounded by those who believed, Angela knew this was far from an ending, but a beginning, one built on a foundation of truth, resilience, and unwavering resolve for change that would resonate far beyond Birmingham's boundary. Together, they had taken another step toward realizing Elise's vision, spreading light into yet another corner of the world, seeking justice, not just now, but always, grown from belief, from dreams rendered real by hands and hearts intertwined. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the courthouse as Angela stood resolutely before the steps, the aftermath of the day's victory resonating deeply within her spirit. The courthouse crowds had mostly dispersed, leaving behind the quiet aftermath of cheer and camaraderie, a national humane tapestry woven from myriad voices now silent but steadfast. What lingered was a collective aura of potential, crystallized in the tangible work that lay ahead. The courtroom's interior, once bustling with activity and charged energy, now settled into a steady hum as Angela and Martin prepared for the upcoming trial. The pivotal face-off, the reckoning of hearts and laws aligning, waited just ahead. It was moments like these where grit met hope, where the complexities of justice sat raw and unapologetic. Angela and Martin stood by a conference table littered with files that reached like tentacles into every shadowy crevice of the precinct's practices. Each document, each testimony had been painstakingly gathered, a testament to relentless resolve forged into strategy. People came and went in the corridor beyond, a continuum caught between motion and deliberation, each step a note in an evolving symphony as they all moved closer to the defining trial. "Are we ready?" Angela asked, glancing at Martin, her voice a mixture of anticipation and steely resolve. These hours were for business, not speeches. They steeped themselves in the facts so utterly that truth became sword and shield in their hand. Martin nodded, sorting through the papers with the meticulous touch of someone who knew every word by heart. "Ready as we'll ever be, we've prepared strength in our case, and in Jensen's testimony, we now have reinforcement to drive it to the core." Angela absorbed his words, contemplating the alliance they had pieced together through whispered confessions and public declarations. Her mind flitted back to Elise, to her dreams, the passion pooled in the tender flesh of memory's reach. Angela had promised her daughter justice, and everything else would bend to fulfill that promise. The sound of footsteps in the hallway provided a soft percussion, a reminder of allies and adversaries alike, an unstoppable current pulling all into its tide. Angela knew their task was far broader than this singular moment, reaching through every action ripple, the waves of their movement cascading far beyond their origin. Then a lull stretched over them, a prelude to what Angela felt as the spirit of a storm tempered by resolution. She clasped her hands, feeling the energy surge, held between fear and anticipation, fervor and calm, a juxtaposition of every emotion riding under the surface. Martin began laying out the strategy, reinforcing their focus. "We keep to the timeline, highlight misconduct in community policing, bring forward community voices. Each testimony needs to build on the last like a crescendo." Angela nodded, gravitating towards tactical precision. "Visibility. No shadow too dense to elude our light. Their attempts to obscure truth fail when we keep it in the open." Her words carried beyond the quiet conference room, laying promises as seeds for the days to come. The court of public opinion had witnessed their intent, and now they would challenge the formal forums to match integrity with transformation. Martin and Angela spent the hours preparing their defense, reviewing statements and strategies, a united front meeting the discomfort of institutional inertia with the blossoming conviction of justice unfurling from society's bedrock. As evening crept in, on the heels of day's twilight slumber, the courthouse, now silent, enveloped them in its embrace, an edifice where dreams of change housed layers of solemnity and hope. Angela felt the pulse of what they called the long arc of history making its bend, gazing beyond to the stars that aligned, weaving selling strands into a vision, that of a city restored, respect renewed, and a legacy honored through action sustained. Angela and Martin exited the courthouse, stepping into an evening air vibrant with the promise of autumn's approach. Darkness was a comforting embrace. Stars put curtains to daylight stretching before them. Tonight, as they stood poised before context's kaleidoscope, they readied themselves with promises engraved upon their spirit. This was their time, their platform, not just for Elise, but for those motherless, fatherless, for children grown where dust heralded dawn unbroken, a dawn reminding them they were not by spectators but authors in a narrative waiting to unfold. Angela's eyes lifted to meet the expanse above, a sky thick with stars, a canopy reflecting the battles they had fought, the victories small and large that now stood testament to their shared cause. The twilight held each echo of progress, a symphony of perseverance carried joyously forward by a city reborn in truth and hope's shared embrace. Reaching for Martin's hand, Angela found solace in touch as they stepped forward, not just toward a courthouse, but toward a story still unfolding, names etched in hearts that would endure long after the ink dried on judgments delivered. Together, they were creators of a history not just remembered, but vividly relived in each shimmer of kindness and fierce vow of justice drawn deep against the canvas of hope. And as they walked side by side into the promise of the morrow, they knew their journey was both inheritance and bequest, a light ignited from within and shared, promising always to illuminate righteousness carved into foundation stone. The courthouse was bathed in soft morning light, an ethereal glow that seemed to cradle the solemn promise of justice about to unfold within its walls. Angela stood at the entrance, taking a deep breath of the crisp air that carried whispers of hope and anticipation. Today was not just a day, it was a culmination, a transformative point in their fight, a reckoning that promised to resound far beyond the confines of this building. Inside, courtroom 5A teemed with the layered energy of history being made. The hum of muted conversations wrapped around the room like an embrace, buoyed by the hope harbored in each heart present. Angela sat beside Martin, her resolve a quiet thunder beneath her calm exterior. Jerry was there, his presence a lighthouse in the storm of emotions that swirled beneath the surface. As the court convened, the heavy mahogany benches filled with those who had stood alongside them through the storms of protest and the calm of silent vigils. Reporters took their places, pens poised and cameras ready to capture the unfolding of what had become a movement more profound than any single incident, a fight for a just tomorrow. Judge Caroline Marshall, known for her steady demeanor and sharp intellect, entered the courtroom with the gravitas of someone deeply aware of the weight of her decisions. Her gavel struck solidly, an echo that punctuated the expectancy-laden air, bringing silence and focus as proceedings began. Our case today brings before us not just facts, but the heart of a community's cry for change. Judge Marshall began, her voice carrying the respect earned through wisdom and experience. What we decide here ripples outwards, holding implications far beyond these walls. Martin rose, presenting their opening arguments with eloquence and precision, a storyteller capturing the essence of struggle and courage that had propelled them here. Evidence and timelines were laid bare. Officer Jensen's breakthrough testimony inscribed with the raw truth that had why institutions had long sought to avoid. Angela watched the defense tables, feeling the churn of tension as their narrative cracked under the light of unyielding evidence. Each statement was a sledgehammer against the fortress built on outdated traditions of exclusion and insularity, now fissured by the rising tide of overdue scrutiny. The day unwound a tapestry of testimonies and counterpoints, each thread a testament to the fortitude of those who had come forward despite fear. Elise's friends recounted her vibrancy, her dreams, painting a picture of a life interrupted by the failures of systems that had forgotten their primary mission to protect. Angela felt tears well in her eyes. As Elise's name wove through the dialogue, her daughter's presence brought vividly to life within the hallowed confines of the courtroom, a reminder that, though silenced, her voice still resonated with the power of awakening. As the prosecution rested, Angela's heart pounded, arterial with the rush of possibilities and the understanding that they had wielded hope and history as champions against the formidable specter of indifference. The judge took her time, reviewing motions and harnessing the weight of their arguments within her judgment. The courtroom sat in pregnant quietude, the collective breath held as faces turned towards the bench. Each second felt elongated by the stakes at hand, but Angela stood firm, surrounded by the community of shared purpose. Finally, Judge Marshall delivered her verdict. Her words broke through the anxious silence like a dawn unfurling through night's dark curtain. Having reviewed the evidence and testimonies, it is apparent that the charges brought forward reflect not only a need for individual accountability, but systemic reform. A ripple of relief, a subdued yet profound exhalation of hope washed over those assembled. The scales of justice had tipped not just in their favor, but towards the dawn of comprehensive reform, sculpted by courage's untiring hands. The Independent Oversight Committee will remain empowered, Judge Marshall continued, her voice steady and commanding, to enact necessary audits and implement public safety measures that ensure everyone, regardless of color or creed, is treated with dignity and equality. The courtroom erupted in applause, joyful tears flowing freely, and voices lifting in a spontaneous hymn of gratitude and promise. Angela closed her eyes, allowing the sound to envelop her, a symphony of acknowledgement that their collective dream was now a living, breathing entity. As they exited the courtroom, Angela found herself surrounded by friends, allies, and once strangers, now comrades on this journey. Elsie's legacy, transformed into a clarion call for justice that captured the spirit of their struggle, lived on. Outside, the plaza was alive with celebration. The wind carried the echoes of songs, chants, and the laughter of children who now inherited a world slightly altered by the promise fulfilled that day, a world forged in resilience and hope. Angela looked up into the sky, where clouds parted, revealing a sun that bathed the city in warmth. She whispered a silent conversation to Elise, feeling her daughter's spirit alight with the promise of change enacted. They had not just spoken for her, they were speaking through her. The path ahead remained winding, but today, this day, they had claimed a definitive victory, a beacon to guide them forward amidst the unfolding pages of history yet unwritten and dreams yet to be realized. Angela knew they would continue to fight, to build, to protect, for this triumph was not an end, but a new beginning, a vivid testament to the power of human rights' unstoppable momentum. As long as there were hearts willing to listen, dreams willing to soar, and stories demanding to be told, the work of justice was replete, an eternal movement, unwavering and alight with the fire of human spirit. If Elise were here, she'd ask if they were ready for what came next. Angela smiled, her answer a quiet, yet resounding yes. Always. Are you with us, listening to the echoes of change? Share your voice, your story, and let's keep the movement alive.